Welcome, everyone. Welcome to our webinar, Chat with a School Psychologist. My name is Mabel Yu, and I'm your host. A little bit about me, I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, and I'm also the executive director at the Women's Therapy Institute in Palo Alto. Now, don't let the name fool you. We also serve all genders. We also have a program for Leaders 360, serving executives and military men and women in resiliency training. So welcome, everyone. I want to actually make a disclaimer here, is that even though this presentation is offered by Women's Therapy Institute, parenting is an all-gender effort. It takes a village to raise a child, and it needs everybody to be on board. So if you have a significant other or a caretaker or trusted adult that you feel it's important for them to be in this webinar, holler them in. And if they cannot make it, don't worry about it. I am going to send a recorded video link at the end in the follow-up email. And also, please don't feel pressured to take notes, because we are going to send the recorded link and also the PowerPoint of this presentation. And I also want to make another disclaimer, is that this is meant to be educational. It's not meant to be diagnostic. It's not meant to be a part of mental health treatment. And although we have prepped some of the questions here today, this webinar is really meant to be an open discussion. So there's a chat at the very bottom for everyone to ask questions. Feel free to chime in, okay? So chatting with us here today is Dr. Lisa Marie Ofinger. Dr. Ofinger is a licensed psychologist serving San Francisco and the Greater Bay Area. She completed her doctoral studies in school psychology at the Columbia University, and she has over 12 years of experience as a school psychologist. Dr. Ofinger specializes in learning, attention, and cognition. In her private practice work, she focuses on child and adolescent psychological assessment. She's currently working as a school psychologist at Envision Education, and she's also a co-director at the clinical training placement at the Alliant International University. Welcome, Lisa Marie. Thank you so much for being here. Now,
thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, a lot of us parents actually have a lot of questions. And as a matter of fact, let me share screen here. We have the PowerPoint. Oh. Can everyone see the PowerPoint? So once again, welcoming how to motivate and support your child distance learning. And so Lisa Marie, a lot of us parents need some support, because this is a whole new ballgame here. Most of us parents have basic parenting skill in getting our kids to do things with a little bit of love, some bribery, coercion, threats, just a little bit, and motivating children and getting them jazzed and learning in a school environment. It's new, it's whole new, it's an uncharted territory. Now that we have school in our living room or in our home somewhere, we really do need some extra tools and support. And so a lot of parents, I actually, a while ago, I sent out a survey and asking my friends and also some of my own clients, and what are some of the hurdles that they have encountered in this distance learning. And here are a couple of questions that they have. Number one, how can I motivate my child to complete distance learning? Number two, how much screen time is appropriate? And then number three, should my child be multitasking during distance learning? And number four, how can I help my kids not forget their homework? In other words, how can I get my kids to do things without a whole lot of nagging or sitting there?
Great question. Yeah.
Very important one. So with that said, I know, Lisa Marie, you have a lot of wonderful materials for us today. What I'm going to do is I am going to stop sharing my screen. I'm going to give you the host access. You have all the power now, and so that you can share some of your good materials with us. Okay?
That sounds great.
All right. Okay. there we are. You have all access now.
There we go. Okay, so first I want to say thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be participating in this conversation with you. I think this is a really, really important topic and very relevant for most of us in California right now. So I'm really happy to be part of the discussion. The first thing I want to name before I even start with anything is that this is hard. And maybe hard is, it feels like even an understatement, right? Like we are kind of being tasked with an impossible task right now, and it is very, very difficult. So I just want to name that. I'm here to hopefully offer some support and strategies and tips, but I also want to just name that, and it's hard.
I am so glad that you named that, because it takes a village to raise a child. And because of the pandemic and distant learning, we parents and caretakers, we become that village. So not only we're the caretakers and the breadwinner, and we're also the teacher's aide, the principal, the attendance office, the nurse, the school nurse, the janitor, the lunch lady. We're practically everything. Oh, we're also the supply closet. So the other day, my 8-year-old, like, starts searching my body, like, Mommy, I need construction paper. Like, why would I have construction paper on me? Okay, so we are everything to our kids now. And thank you so much for naming that.
Yeah, so that is all very true and very real. So the first thing I'm going to touch on is these are some really basic things, tips, but I think they're important. So I'm going to name them, right? Thinking about what does the physical space look like for distance learning. So some of the things to think about, I think they kind of fall into two buckets, right? The first bucket is about setting the frame. What, where, when does school look like? And when everything is happening out of your home, it's really important to have these distinctions, the frame set up as best as we can, right? So kind of what comes up for me around that is how to be intentional about where and when school is happening. Can there be a consistent space that students use every day? And if you have multiple kids in your home, or if you're like me in a really small space in San Francisco, we're sharing space all the time. So it could be helpful to have a school bag, right? Where all of your things are packed and your materials are kept together, and to keep kids organized, right? Any support to help organization, routine, stability, grounding in a time like this, I think is really important. The second kind of bucket is around the distraction piece. And one of the pieces I think when we think about distractions, I think auditory distractions are maybe what we think about first, right? The background noise, and things that are helpful for that, right, are some white noise machines, headphones, thinking about quiet spaces. But the other pieces that I don't know if we think about as much is visual distractions, right? Like just sometimes sitting at a kitchen table when there's a whole open space around you is a hard place to work.
Oh yeah, it's the best place to get snacks and everything. And no, as a matter of fact, it's interesting you mentioned that, because our school actually gave the desktop blinders. At first, when me and my husband looked at it, we're like, nah, that's not gonna work. But then when we actually implemented that, it worked wonders. They're like blinders for horses, but except for kids. And it's great because it really minimizes a lot of the visual stimulation, and also can paste the calendars on the blinders. So dividers, they call it dividers, not blinders. Sorry. So it really works wonders. Yeah, definitely do that. If the school offers it for you, great. If not, it's really cheap on stationery stores or Amazon. Yeah. But Lisa Marie, we have a live question here. If the kids always have two screens, one for class and the other for their own entertainment, what can we do to help them focus on their lecture?
That is a really good question. Okay, so this is actually, I have a slide for that, and maybe I should go there, or should we hold it?
Yeah, I think if you're eventually going to go there, that question is going to be answered. Let's follow along.
Yeah, that sounds great.
We will.
We will get to it for sure.
We will get to it. Yes.
And I want to name you're not alone, right? We are all, yes, especially with adolescents and tweens, the social media screen piece is real, and I think it is very hard to navigate. And then, so, but with that, I will also name the piece around tech distractions is real. So kind of where I'll talk about this a little bit more later, but when we think about cognitive capacity, we're all working with within a limited working memory cognitive capacity, meaning there's only so much attention we have in our brain. And when we start dividing our attention, like giving a little bit here and a little bit there, it's really hard to learn new information. Learning new information is a hard, cognitively demanding task, and it is not something that we can just give a little bit of ourselves to. So it's really, it may not seem like a big deal if to a child, right, to a younger person, and also 13, it may not seem like a big deal to be listening to a lecture. Oh, got a text message, let me see. Oh, got this alert, let me see. Oh, saw this notification pop up on my computer, let me see.
All these things are actually more exciting than the lecture itself. So you can't blame a child for wanting to, whether they're little children or they're teens, you can't blame them for diverting those.
Or adults.
Oh yeah, guilty. Yes.
Same. Speaking for myself. But when these little interruptions pop up, what happens, right, is it diverts our attention. It takes away from our limited capacity of working memory, our cognition, and it makes it really hard to learn information deeply.
And how long does it take for, once the person is distracted, how long does it take for the person to come back into concentration?
Yeah, I think it could vary, but if you think about the kind of, there's a model in cognitive psychology about depth of processing, and depth of processing really means we have to interact with information that is hard and struggle through it and get into it. And that is actually how we learn, right? It's not like this surface level, or we're learning something that's hard, right? That's requires a higher level of comprehension. Like, think about if you were going to, like me, I don't have any training in organic chemistry. If I was going to read a book about organic chemistry and try to understand it, I would have to put a lot of focus and attention into that, right? And if I wouldn't be able to dig into it in this deep way, process it in a deep way, if I am also giving part of my attention this way for a text message, for a, so I guess what I would name for this with the limiting distractions is screens are real, social media is real, all these other pieces of technology are real, they're not going away. What can we think about is how do we set some frames around when am I learning, when am I on my social media accounts, and what's actually realistic, right? Maybe it's 10 minutes of learning and 5 minutes of social, I don't know, like it might be different for every student, but it's kind of, if we can start to funnel, kind of separating it, right? Putting the pieces where they go, then we'll have more cognitive space available for learning.
Putting that mental boundary.
Yes,
Okay.
Exactly. But great question. So I have some other questions that challenges, these are common challenges. These are questions that you suggested to me, but these are also things that I've been talking a lot about in my private practice and in my school psychology work. So they're trending. These are questions lots of people are having right now.
Yeah.
So kind of this piece around how do I motivate my child to complete distance learning? So I put some things in here that I thought that I kind of, some tips here, but also I'm interested if others have suggestions of things that are working for you. Please drop them in the chat. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat so we can kind of learn from each other about what's working in others' home, because I think that's a really important way to share information, right? So the first piece I would think about around motivation is clear expectations, right? Kids do best, students do best, adults do best, right? When you know exactly what you're supposed to do. So sometimes I think I know for myself, when I am signing into a work meeting, I have my Zoom account, my passwords, my emails, I got my iPad. I'm trying to trying to ground in where I am and what I'm supposed to be doing feels harder now than it ever has. So just kind of maybe some prompting around what is it that this child, your student, your son, daughter, a child is expected to do in this moment. If what prompts do they need to access that? And can you give this direction in multiple ways? Can you say what you're supposed to be doing and write it for them if that's hard? So just around clear expectations. Got it. The other thing that's a little bit related and that's related to what I said before is kind of the clear time frame for working with scheduled breaks. It's easier to work for a period of time when you know a break is coming up. rather than you're going to work until this is done. Sometimes that's not helpful because maybe it'll take a really long time.
Yeah. So Lisa Marie, we also have another live question. So this one is a middle school kid threatens not to go to class if we block YouTube, and 1 or 2 classes actually need to use YouTube to show lectures. What should the parents do?
So yeah, that's a really good question.
Yeah.
So kind of with the social media, I guess YouTube is considered social media. With the social media piece, what I would think about when I understand the pull to set limits around social media, right? And wanting to have children who are well-rounded, who do lots of things with many interests. When we're thinking about students who use lots of social media, one of the things that I think is important to think about is what is the function of that? So right now, everything is happening through screens. It is our social connection, it is our school, it is our work, it is our entertainment, it is, all the things that we're doing are all being funneled through screens. If we have a child who's using social media a lot, right, or using it more than you as a parent would want them to, it's really important to think about what is the function. Why are they using social media? Is it for entertainment? Is it for social connection? And before taking that away or placing a limit or thinking about limiting it, also thinking about, both, and thinking about what is it that is going to replace that. So if it's social connection and YouTube is a form of social connection, then what else can they do instead of using YouTube? So it's very important with social media and with lots of things, right? When you're wanting to change behavior, thinking about what is the function, why are students engaging behavior, and then what can you do instead?
Absolutely. I think it's also interesting from that question. It seems like how to not engage in that power struggle. With that, you block YouTube, I'm not going to class. How to stop that power struggle, instead maneuver it in a way that the YouTube can be an incentive.
Oh,
what are your thoughts about that?
I like that a lot, because I think, yes,
so
rewards work better than punishment. We know this, right? From all the literature, all the research. But yeah, tell me, what are you thinking, Mabel? How would you think about that?
So my kids they don't do much YouTube, and they're too young. I clamped that. But middle schooler, so the question is from a middle schooler parent. So one of the things that I have done is my kid really likes Epic, and the school also used Epic as a book reading. So we turned some of that into the incentive, and really sit down with them and say, hey, you know what, I really don't want to block this. As a matter of fact, the less thing I block, the better. At the same time, this has become an issue. So how do you problem solve this? I first let my kids kind of take the reign, and they're thinking about these different strategy. But then ultimately, I'm the one who have the vetoing power. And how about this? If you read how many books, or if you finish all the must-dos, you can have this amount. So frame it in the way that I'm not blocking you. If you don't listen to what I say, that becomes a power struggle. When the kid hears about power struggle, instinctively they want to fight it back. Even when it's a battle that they know they don't want to fight, they still would, because it's a defensive fight, flight, and freeze mechanism. So for the parents, if you feel like there are power struggles, you kind of feel it in your blood, take a deep breath. Instead of making a power struggle, make that into incentive.
Really like that. And because what you're getting from that is information that YouTube is a very powerful motivator. And how can you is it possible instead to move YouTube to after you complete school, then you can go on YouTube, right? Kind of what you're talking about. How do you move it to the incentive? I really like that.
Yeah, heck, I'll make a YouTube with you. Yeah. So we have another question here, is that what if the child doesn't care for incentives, such as they want a toy or YouTube, or but would disregard it if it requires them to complete their studies? Something else is in there if a child doesn't even care for incentive, or maybe it's the wrong incentive. I don't know.
I guess when I am thinking about that question, what I start to get really curious about is what is motivating for that child. And I know this from my private practice work. Sometimes I have found that what parents think is motivating for a child is actually different than what the child thinks is motivating. And so I like to do in my work and you can do this, right? Do some sort of preference inventory. What would be something that you would really like to earn? What would you really like to gain? And what I have found is that oftentimes it's not even buying things, or there's kids, I've really heard some things, kids all different for a different age, but sometimes something like, I really liked it when we did family movie night. I really liked it when we baked that cake together. I like being able to pick what we're having for dinner once a week. So there are things that, depending on the age and depending on the student, right? It's obviously, there's a lot of range of what this looks like for you and your family. But I think just really, if there's a way to kind of lean into, well, what is motivating for you? What will help you? What incentive will work here?
Yeah. It's interesting because I worked in a school setting before, and I worked with really young kids, and I find that the best way, there's a lot of groundwork for parents to do, but it's worthwhile. The step zero of motivating a child is relationship. If a child doesn't have a good relationship with that, if you two don't have a good relationship, you two don't hang out, or being silly sometimes, those are rapport, those are trust building. If you and the child don't have that, if it's constantly nagging or telling them to do something, there's no motivation. You can't even start the step one of motivation. So the discussion that you mentioned, talking to the kids, like, hey, you know what? Like, what do you like? Trying to really understand them, understand what their mind thinking. Yeah. Sometimes the incentive that we think about, may not be what the child wants. And it's also important to kind of look up the 5 languages of love. I work a lot with that with my couples clients and children as well. They also have languages of love that they really respond to. So if it's toys or YouTube, the materials, they're not responding to the gifting language of love, it's worthwhile to explore what else is there.
I really, really like that. And I really like the way you kind of cut through all the things I was saying and reminded us that this is all built on relationships.
Built already. And you have a lot of good materials. I think it's great. We're complementing each other. Let's roll.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm going to move to the second question, or the second challenge. And this has kind of come up a little bit, right? It's how much screen time is appropriate? What a good question. Okay. So I'm not here to answer that question. I'm not here to give you the number. But I am here to hopefully give you some information. So some things that are important to keep in mind, right? Generation Z, which is, I think it's 8 to age 21 right now, is considered Gen Z. They spend a lot of time on screens. It is just part of the culture. It is part of the generation. It is one of the identifying features of the way they are moving through adolescence, the way they're moving through the world. So I'm saying that because I want to normalize it. Lots of kids, most kids are on screens a lot. Saying that to normalize it.
Adults too, yeah.
Adults too, yes. So pre-COVID, this is some information that comes from before COVID. So I don't know, I imagine these numbers look even much higher, right? I wonder if they've doubled, I don't know. But before COVID, the estimate was that tweens were spending 4 hours on average, 4 hours and 44 minutes on social media a day. That did not count school, right? So this doesn't count school or homework. This is like other time. And then teens were spending 7 hours, 22 minutes a day. So that was the average before COVID. So
forget sleep. Just forget sleep. Yeah.
Forget sleep, right?
Yeah, forget it.
That is right.
Wow, 7. Yeah.
So things to think about, right? And I think this has come from Dr. Pagnata, and I put her information at the bottom of the slide as well. She is a social media expert. And one of the things that she really encourages people to think about is it's actually not about, the question is not about, is social media good or is social media bad? It's more about, the question is about how are we using it to engage, right? It's not really about evaluating, is this good for our teens? Is this bad for, that's not the right question. The better question is, what is more personal, right? Why is my family using the screens, or what are they getting out of it, right? What's going on?
Absolutely. So I think thank you so much for touching on that, because it's not so much the screen time, but it's about how you're engaging with whatever that's behind the screen. So if it is the engagement active, are you actively engaging to another human being? Like, you know, all of us here are doing and learning and chiming in. That's active engagement. Inactive engagement, it just kind of watch TV. You know, your brain kind of goes into the zombie mode. So thank you so much for touching on that. There's a difference. I want the parents to realize that it's not just screen time, it's not a blanketed statement, but how the brain is functioning while, you know, engaging in the screen. However, I do know that as a parent, I am concerned about my kids' eyeballs falling off for watching the screen too much. So there is that concern, right? You know, check with your doctor and pediatrician, you know, what to do. But there are blue light glasses that you can really help kids preserve their eyesight. You know, that is a big concern. And however, the screen time, it's, you know, how the brain is functioning during that.
Yes, and just to add, so I appreciate what you're saying, right? So
Yeah.
not all screen time is equal, and just kind of the way the research thinks about this, right, is there's a real difference between passive using, like you said, just absorbing information, or they talk about in the research like the mindless scrolling on social media.
Mm-hmm.
People who engage in mostly passive use of screens are those individuals are correlated with the higher levels of mental health risk factors. So when you think about depression, anxiety, those pieces that sometimes I've heard blanket statements like kids are on screens by this number are associated with higher levels of mental health symptoms. It's actually not that clear. When you start digging into the research, individuals, children who are engaging in active use, those correlations don't look the same at all. So if you are like you just said, Mabel, if you're participating in a webinar, if you're creating content, even if you're making posts in Twitter and Instagram, like if you're creating content and contributing to a community, that actually is impacting your mental health, your brain development differently than if you're just mindlessly versus mindfully consuming.
Yeah, that being said, Zoom class, if it's interactive, if it's the teacher has breakout sessions and kids engage with each other, that's actually a good thing.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And another thing I wanted to name, if related to this, right, is that screens are here to stay, right? I can't imagine that it's shifting.
Not going anywhere.
And so with that, right, when you think about teens and tweens and they have very active online lives often, it's actually one of the recommendations is to really engage kids on their online life, right? So the way you might ask, like, what did you do in school today? You may start to develop a practice of, and what's going on online today? Because as a parent, you want to be aware of what their online life is like. Are they experiencing cyberbullying? Are there hard things happening online? Did they see something that made them unsettled or worried? And by opening up the lines of communication and just normalizing that, I know you're online, I know you have an active life online, and I want to know about it. Tell me about it. I'm really curious about you. Those are really good ways to build relationships, but also to really understand what's going on for your kids.
We have another live question here, and I'm not a gamer, but my kids are. How engaged are games like Minecraft? Is that considered passive or active?
That's a really good question. I don't know if I can answer it definitively. I don't know Minecraft, but I guess what I'm thinking about it is what I would wonder about is how much mental engagement, right, is going on. And I think that would be where the line is, but it's a really great question. And also, if anyone wants to email me, I could send you some other resources about some articles or research spaces that might have more information on that.
So about gaming is that, well, when we talk about engagement, we also entail that whether it's a meaningful engagement with, you know, whatever that's on the other side of the screen, having discussions, creating content. Those activities, it actually slows us down, and it allows our cognition or executive functioning to make decisions, to create things. Yes. However, with gaming is that, sure, on the surface, it looks interactive. However, the engagement, each second of the game, the experience is different than the next second. What it creates is, you know, the dopamine in the brain overflows it. right? So it creates that almost addiction-like kind of behavior. And here's the thing about it: is the video game and the engagement with it is, if it's not a problem, it's not a problem. So if, let's say, you and your child has a boundary around it, has a time expectations, and also what type of game that they're engaging, if there's a support or discussion around that, and it doesn't affect the child's learning or sleeping habits or any other daily functioning, I'll say, all right, you do you. However, if it becomes a problem, right? If a child just doesn't sleep and it affects the next day, it affects the mood, then it's something that we have to really be careful about. So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I really like the way you're thinking about that. What struck me is when you talked about, is it slowing us down or is it just into this like automatic reflex?
Yeah, it's revving up our brain even more, having that dopamine oversurge. Right? Because when we have that, instinctively our brain seeks for more, right? And what would the child be willing to do to see more of that? Now, when it becomes that territory, well, it's something to pay attention to.
Yes. Really, yeah, really well said.
All right. So what other stuff you have?
Yeah, this is great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's see. So there may be some chats coming in, but I can't see them.
There are, yes. I'm actually reading it as we go. So,
good.
Yeah, we have another question is, what is considered a suitable recreational break during school hours, such as, is TV okay?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah,
so, it's hard to answer that because I feel like it's deeply personal, but what would you say, Mabel?
So first line of defense is if they're on the screen already, I would, at least this is what happens in my home, is I would discourage them to get on the screen during break time and really have them engage in something that's offline. I have a special segment of break time because I'm working in my office and they have their 90-minute lunch break. I said, well, let's have a make a mess in the kitchen kind of break. If you want to make something, if you want to do stuff, you can make a mess. I'm not going to get mad, but there's ground rules. Don't burn the house down, okay? Don't flood the house, don't burn the house down.
Good ground rule, good ground rule.
Yeah, the two basics. And they get really psyched about that. You can make a mess. I'm like, wow, be mindful. And then, so I encourage them to actually go and create something, just something offline. However, if let's say they tell me I must read Epic or must watch this video, well, you know what? I am not going to make a big stink about it. Okay, and as long as the child and I have an agreement that, hey, you can watch this for 10 minutes, but I do need your butt back on Zoom 5 minutes before start time. Can we agree on that? If there is an agreement, okay. All right, I'm not gonna make a big stink about it. It's hard times right now.
Yeah. Yes, I like the way you're talking about it because you're thinking about like the frame, right? Like what is it? What's the frame for this? And then kind of helping your kids outline that for themselves, right? And so maybe it's some sort of something in the middle, like, and going back to the relationship, like how can we as parents negotiate this within our families?
Oh, I wheel and deal with my kids all the time, and we should have a webinar on how to wheel and deal with your kids.
I love it. Yes.
But yes, is TV okay? I guess I'm more concerned about the content of the TV. Definitely, I am hoping that's something age appropriate and it's something that doesn't get them so riled up that they get overly excited when they go back to class. So those are some of the things that to consider. I worry more about content than anything else.
That makes sense to me. Right. Yeah.
Cool. So, keep them coming. Yes.
Okay, so here's another challenge that I have been thinking about. How can I help my child multitask during distance learning? Or maybe the question is, should they be multitasking during distance learning? And we touched on this a little bit before, but I guess I would come back to this piece around cognitive efficiency, right? So we are all working under a limited capacity working memory,
Mhm.
which means that it is very hard, maybe impossible, to do two effortful things at once, right? So in order to do two things at once, right?
Mhm.
So one of them has to be automatic. So when we think about this, right? The example I have in there is if you're supposed to listen to a lecture and take notes, you have to have really good writing fluency, right? You don't have
Mhm.
to. If you're someone who's stopping and have to think through, writing out every single letter, you're gonna miss the lecture.
Yeah, yeah,
So
yeah.
it kind of goes back to that piece, right? If we are working under a limited capacity working memory, then dividing our attention is very, very hard, and it's hard to learn things deeply.
Mhm. Yeah, so to answer that parent's question, and you know what, the question of dual monitors and
Oh,
multitasking actually came up a couple of times, and my client asked me that before, and I just literally what I told my client is that if your child can be like an amoeba and separate himself into two and do two things simultaneously and 100% focus on both, yes. However, we're human beings. We're not amoebas. We cannot focus two things or multiple things at 100% in each one. So
right.
to answer the question, should the child have dual monitor? Talk to the teacher to see if that's a necessity. If let's say your child is in a high level engineering programming, she needs to have one coding environment and another testing environment running simultaneously, then yes. If let's say it's just something cut and dry, simple Zoom lecture, nothing else, they don't need a dual monitor. They don't. And definitely check with the teacher. Check with the teacher and see what equipment is or necessity. Another thing about it is that this is very important. Engaging the teacher in the conversation. And if let's say things are really getting out of hand, and the child is multitasking, doing TikTok on the side, really, as the teacher, is it okay? Is it appropriate to have a technology agreement with the students or that particular student? Teacher, parent, and the child needs to be all in sync. It's like a tribunal, okay? And have that agreement down. And whenever the child says, I need the other monitor, and you can say, no, your teacher said so, it's in the agreement right here. So they have nothing to say. There's nothing to argue back about. But most importantly is be in tune, check with the school, check with the requirement that what's needed. And sometimes kids, they play us like a fool. Don't let them.
Oh, my home office is.
We forgive you. We're all in the same boat. There's a whole train of dogs. It's a miracle that my twins haven't made a single noise right now. It's gonna happen anytime soon. So I also do ask all of you for, thank you for your patience.
Yes,
we certainly understand. Yeah. Hope they're having a good time. Yeah.
That's right.
Mm-hmm. So I think there's another live one here. Okay. Okay. If agreement is not honored, do we have revert to punishment? Any other recommendation and positive way parents can use to cope with that situation? Now, the agreement is not honored. It also depends on whether the child has a say in that agreement. The child needs to have some say. If let's say like, here's the agreement, booyah, sign this. They're not gonna, they're like, nah, I don't know. But frame it as, you know what? I am really thinking about your well-being in mind. At the end of the day, is what do you want in life? It's not what I want. I always tell my kids, they're 8 years old, but I tell them that one day I'm gonna die. I'm gonna die, I'm gonna go to heaven, and you're on your own. What do you want? So we engage in that conversation pretty early on. So to foster their own self-efficacy. It's not what I want, kid. It's how you want to design your life. So have the child really go out one of these days, have an ice cream or whatnot. Just relax. Say, hey, like, how are things going? Or engage in just low grade some future discussion, and then come back home and it's like, hey, you know what? I noticed XYZ, and I don't know if it's really working. What do you think? Is it going to work well with your future plan? And it's not what I want, but that's here to help you. So if the child has some say into it, they're more likely to comply. And of course, as parents, we think about like, what if it's like a really like rebellious kid? Then it's a private discussion. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and the other thing I was thinking about as you were talking, Mabel, is there a way to integrate the reinforcement reward piece with it, right? That we were talking about earlier. So maybe if the agreement is not framed, if you break the agreement, there's a punishment. Maybe it's if you meet the agreement, there's a reward, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's positive reinforcement. Yeah, absolutely. Positive reinforcement versus negative reinforcement. Most kids don't respond well with negative reinforcement. But yeah, it sounds like if this is an interesting discussion, we can definitely maybe have another segment. Maybe I hope this answers the question. So we have another live one here.
The good one, yeah.
Amy here wrote she likes the word accountability. Yes.
It's a good word.
Great word.
Right?
It's a great word. And oh yeah, sometimes I like to use, instead of using the word reward, reward's a good word. No, kids like, I like to use celebration. Whenever I have the point system, because Zoom is hard, I do reward my kids with brainy points or smarty points. That's why I use 3 terms: brainy points, smarty points, and expert points, so they feel good about things. And so I said, hey, if you get how many extra points at the end of the week, let's celebrate. Instead of reward them for task done, like 1-for-1 getting a payment, let's celebrate for your effort in accomplishing this hard work. Okay, being on Zoom, doing all that is not easy, but you tried, you did well. Let's celebrate. So I did A/B testing, and they responded so much better with the word celebration. So I thought I'd share that. Yeah.
I like that a lot, right?
Who doesn't like celebration? Yeah. But and accountability, that is awesome. Yeah. So we have another one here. What about listening to music while doing homework? I sometimes find my boys having an extra tab with YouTube music playing. I often ask them to close the tab and concentrate on homework. But they always argue and say it's just music. They could get their work done while listening to music. Well, check it out if true.
Yeah.
If they get their work done, the thing is that I like to study human performance, and there's the zone, like it's the Z, right? And athletes have that, and a lot of people, presenters, actors, they all have that. It's the Z, right? The zone. What it takes to get you into the most optimal, most efficient zone. So check it out. If your child says, I get my work done, music helps me be in the Z, but ask the child to do some A/B testing. Like, you know what? I would like to test this out. Chances are your child probably purposely sabotage it, but it's for data's sake. Like,
for research.
Yeah. Let's test it out and see if they really accomplish a whole lot more. And by the way, if you do testing, make sure that the part without music is their favorite subject. Because if the part without is not their favorite subject, without music, it's probably like pulling teeth. They might not go for that. But yeah, check it out. And if it really gets them into the Z, hey. But also check the content. If it's like full of curse words, and if you disagree with that, then limit that. Hey, can we have different types of genre or lyrics? It's the content that I'm most concerned. Yeah. What do you think?
Yeah, I think I love the way you answered that, because actually the research is mixed on it, right? The research says that sometimes for some people music is helpful, and sometimes for other people music is not helpful. So, but it really comes back to this divided attention piece, right? If you are working on something that is very hard and taxing, then all your mental space has to go towards that. So if you're putting music on in the background and letting it live in the background, that's okay. If you're actually singing along and naming the lyrics and not focusing on the hard task in front of you, then it might not be helpful. So
very good point. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's kind of this piece that sometimes for some people, for some tasks, music is helpful. So the research on that is really mixed.
Fantastic. Thank you. That's a really good point, depending on how they are engaging with it as well.
Yes.
Cool.
Great
All
question.
Right.
I have this, my last slide here for today is about how can I help my kids not to forget homework? And a lot of these themes we've heard before, but I think they apply, right? So with the piece around not forget homework, I know. So the piece around clear expectations, right? What needs to be done? How can you help your child understand that the structure? So if we think about executive functioning, works from the outside in. So students who are most are developing or learning, children are developing, learning, tweens, adolescents, we're all still developing executive functioning skills. So having supports on the outside, calendars, reminders, apps, pieces like that, that'll help you remember, help you organize. Those are all helpful and normal and on point developmentally. And then again, back to the piece around incentives and really, why am I celebrations? what's motivating to get their work done, right? Those are the pieces that I thought about. But what comes up for you, Mabel? What do you think about this one?
How to help kids not forget their homework. I think number one is that is there a system? Like you said, what kind of system that they have in place? Is there a reminder? So I use this watch for kids, especially to remind them. It's not so much about the homework reminder, but reminding them to go back to the Zoom class and things like that. And however, at the end of the day, I still need to check their what's on their list and what to do. The truth is that developmentally, even high school, even 17, 18 years old, developmentally speaking, the prefrontal cortex still haven't been fully developed, and they will forget things. They will. And the best that we can do is at night check, obviously, long time before they have to go to bed. Don't just check right before they go to bed, then go to bed. And really help them along the way, check the list, and even ask them like, hey, what helps you remember better, right? Have them even be the active participant in these problem solving. I also ask my kids, we have a cube timer for kitchen, like 5, 10, 15 minutes. I said, I asked them, hey, you have this homework due. How many minutes on the cube do you want to do it for? They decide. I want to do it for 5 minutes. Okay. Well, they're third grade right now, so their homework's not as intense, but make it realistic. And sometimes they're art homework that's very more elaborate. They're like 5 minutes. I said, really? You sure? Maybe 10. Okay. You let them decide too, because right now it's also their time to trial and error.
That's
and
right.
Learning how to tell this takes how long to do it. It helps them decide and decision making, and this is the time to do it. So if they make mistakes,
right,
let it go. Yeah.
I think that's really important, right? Because I think oftentimes adults too, right? We think things are going to be much quicker than they generally are. So when you're thinking about a developing brain and developing executive functioning skills, having a clear, realistic sense of how long things actually take is a really important step for managing time, right? If you have an hour to do homework, how are you going to fit it all in? And how are you going to block things out? Can you start this assignment the night before? Can you start this project the night before? How long,
So I usually also incentivize them if, let's say, something is due on Friday and Wednesday rolls around, and I like to finish things fast. And I'm like, well, what would you like to do on Thursday if you don't have homework? And they will say, oh, these wonderful things. I'm going swimming. I'm going to go to the park. But so how do we make it so that Thursday we don't have homework? You have a bunch of stuff to do. Today's Wednesday. I want you to go play on Thursday. What can we do here? And once we frame the question that way, it might motivate them a little bit. make the end vision, like what would you like to do when there's no homework, and that would get them set in motion. And Lisa Marie, we have a few more live ones. So if a child, so it sounds like it's a Q&A now. If a child is already into playing games, any tips or advice on how to limit their game time or get rid of the game altogether? Ooh.
That's a good question.
Yeah.
You know, the way I respond to it, right? It's like, well, there's a piece around moderation, right? So everything is okay in moderation. So really thinking about what's the frame for you and your family? What is the frame for your child? What is it that you hope that they are doing during the day? How do you hope they're spending time? But the other piece that I would want to kind of come back to is thinking about the function. What is the function of the behavior? Why is the child spending so much time gaming? And if we take the gaming away, what's going to be there to replace it? We have to build that thing up too, right? It's a two-part problem solution, two-part suggestion, right? So it's as we're thinking about limiting one piece, what are we going to put in its place? And right now, to be perfectly honest, it's hard to find things to put in the place of screens. We are so limited. And in the Bay Area, it's hard to go outside right now. It's smoke everywhere. And, you know, it's just, all the things are just hard. So,
yeah. So,
I don't know. What do you think, Mabel? What comes up?
Well, first thing first is that if take away getting rid of the game altogether, at least not in the presentation with you and the child. It's like, if you don't do this, I'm going to take all the, it's going to shut that door of discussion, right? So throw that out in the moment. We would put that in our back pocket. In terms of limiting their game time, again, maybe I would like to understand the context a little bit more. It's like, how is it affecting them? If it's affecting them to the point that they're not sleeping, 11, they're still not sleeping, well, we have a problem. My stance is it's not a problem if it's not a problem, right? So if the kids are already into games, well, what kind of, what's the function in their lives? Yeah, and we have another live one. I'm not calling it like a fish, sorry. We catch one. Yeah. So okay, let me see. I asked my 6th grader how she wants me to help her with that. She suggests I check all her stuff is complete and turn it in every day, not every once in a while before 5 p.m. Great. Wow. Okay. When we elicit our kids to be part of the decision making, they are so much more willing to work with you. That's part of the motivation, is giving them some degree of control, relationship, and giving them control and good boundaries.
Oh, and it helps with the reflection, right? It sounds like you're able to articulate what you needed for support.
So we have a high school and middle school boy, and our family just started using Slack. Awesome, I use that for work. It has been super helpful to help the boys and us keep organized. They could post the homework to remind them and schedule a deadline reminder. Wow.
Great.
Yes, something that I use it with my
tool.
staff too. Yeah. I didn't think about that. Excellent. Thank you so much for that suggestion. And we have another one. What do we respond with when kids say, I don't want to do the assignments? It's boring. It's boring.
Oh.
It's boring. Oh, I love that term. I've been using that term ever since I was little. It's boring. Well, actually, let's assess it. Yeah, let's assess it for a moment. Why a child thinks something's boring. It could range from there's a learning gap. There's a learning gap, and the child just realizes it's too hard. I cannot engage anymore. And then things become boring. And then they will have all these facades like, I don't like it. It's boring. There's check if there's a learning gap, or check if the child has some extra ability. I'm not saying like X-Men, but I'm talking about maybe it's the child has already know this thing, and is the child gifted. It's important to do those assessments. Take stock in that too. Is this appropriate material for my child? Yeah. So when the child says it's boring, there could be so many things that come up, right? Is it boring because it cramps your style, like in your video game time? Like, check out if it's cramping their style, right? Under the eye, it's boring. It can tell you so much. So I would say definitely engage with the child in more casual conversation, like what's boring about it? Oh, okay, well, find out more. Yeah. So, okay, we definitely have a very active audience here. How could we improve the quality of the homework instead of just turn it in and done for the day? I know this very well.
I know I think there's a piece of that probably is a higher level skill of thinking about what do we need to do to check off the list, and what do I need to spend a little bit more time learning and engaging with? Because I think the types of assignments kids generally fall into those two buckets, right? It's something that's just kind of, to keep up the engagement, keep up the skill, and then there's a piece that's higher level that's requiring a more engagement. So I think there's a piece that before kind of thinking about just getting through the day, it's kind of like, well, what bucket is this falling into? What's the function of this assignment?
Yeah, yes, very much so. What's function? Is it useful? So we also have a comment. Definitely agree about the learning gap. I often find that if my boys were stalling or taking a long time doing homework, it's because they were struggling with the content. I would help rewatch the classwork with him, or look up on the YouTube that explains the concept in an easy and fun way. It's amazing to watch how proud they get when they understand the concept and able to finish the work on their own. Wow, bravo, yes, definitely. And it's really interesting because the proud, I know very well that, children, sometimes they don't produce their best work. And I ask them, like, if I were to post this, like, in front of your friends, I use peer pressure sometimes.
On social media.
If I were to show your friend this, is this something that you're proud of? Is this something that you can stamp your name on it and says, that's my work? And well, I have twins, so one would say no, and then she would redo it. And the other one was like, I don't care. And then I realized that there might be something else that she cares about. And the reality of it is that there's so many subjects in school and subject in life that our children are not interested in every single one of them. And we also, as parents, need to recognize what those are and hone in on the ones that they are really interested in. Sure, we would still encourage them to do, the work on the stuff that they're not interested in, but focus on what they like and what they don't like, and where their talents are, where their special sauce is. So yeah, that's my thought.
I like that.
So, okay, I think we are getting to a time where we are about to take a pause, and I just want to say thank you so much, Lisa Marie, for being here with us and share a lot of your knowledge gem with us. And thank you so much for putting together the PowerPoint. And I'll definitely, with your permission, and Lisa Marie gave you the permission, yes, I will send that out along with the recording of this video so that you can share it with your spouse, with the caretaker. You can actually shove it in their face. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to shove it in my spouse's face. Like, look what I did, look what I learned. And so definitely, it takes a village, and all of you parents here, you are the village right now, and it's not easy. So take a deep breath. Know that it's hard, and it's temporary, hopefully, and we'll get through this together. Okay, so thank you so much for being here. And if you like this video, if you like the webinar, let me know. I'm planning on doing some more, and I have a survey at the very end, and you can let me know what works for you in this webinar, what we need to improve. You won't hurt our feelings. We're cool. And perhaps even tell us what topics you want to learn about next time. Okay? Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thank you for letting me be here. I really appreciate it. Part of the conversation with everyone.
Oh, you're awesome. Hey, you're awesome. You're great. I'm so glad that you're able to take the time. Okay, thank you. Bye, everyone. Bye.
Oh.